I mean, there has been also so many discussions about what should we look at. Should we look at like the outcome of something and say, is this creative? Or should we look at the process, how something is being done, if this is some kind of creative process? Or also, I mean, is the person who has done it a creative person or not? Or even like independent from these, also like the perspective from the outside. I mean, does this society regard something as creative or not? Right? So that whatever it is, it can be considered creative in the essence.
Hello and welcome. The following is a conversation with André Holzapfel, Associate Professor of Media Technology with a specialisation in Sound and Music Computing at the Division of Media Technology and Interactive Design at KTH. André holds 2 PhDs in Computer Science and Ethnomusicology. I was deeply honoured that he agreed to participate in this podcast. I hope that you enjoy the program. How would you describe the current role of AI in music?
The character of AI in music.
The current role of AI.
The current role of AI in music. Well, first of all, we need to speak a little bit like, I mean, what do we think is AI, right? So, if we say what right now, it's mostly machine learning, right? And machine learning in music has been there for quite a long while in various roles, and for the analysis, the understanding of music, for the synthesis of music. It took some major leaps recently, but it plays a central role in all fields, be it distribution, be it production, composition, you can say it became more popular since we call it artificial intelligence, maybe.
It is quite interesting because I talk to people that work in music and AI, and the answer normally tends to be quite similar to yours in that sense, that when the synthesizers started being used in different ways and we implemented computation on it. But do you think that there has been a bit of a leap or a shift ever since more generative models have come forward? Or
well, I mean, the shift was not about, I think, generative models. The shift was basically about the availability of deep learning when we became, when we had established the ability to train very large networks on very large data sets. I mean, that created, I think, a shift in quality of what is being done when it comes for engineering approaches that analyze or synthesize music. I mean, that changed a lot the way things are approached. Nowadays, more using very large data sets and using deep learning, and before other technologies. So
it is mostly, you would say, these corpuses that you train the models on.
Yeah.
And could you
in combination with the architectures that are being used, of course, but I mean, it's a lot about the data that is being used that also guides like the problems that are being approached, right?
And the corpuses, are they mostly, because when it comes to vision and AI, the corpuses are quite finely tuned. How are the corpuses used and tuned in pre-training of AI systems?
Well, I mean, it's a very general question, but if we look at the data sets that are, for example, being discussed within the field of music information retrieval, which is the engineering field that tries to get information out of music data, also for the scope of synthesis. If you look at the data sets that are being used there, it is there are certain biases in these data. There are certain musics clearly overrepresented because they're easier available. And I would say the amount of consideration of what the data actually contains is a little bit overshadowed by the demand for larger data sets. So it's still more the thinking like just more data is better than really to really see what is within the data sets very often.
So do you think that Western music kind of dominates to some degree?
Well, that's pretty obvious, yeah.
And if I may just ask, what areas of Western music do you think are mostly dominating in these corpuses?
Well, in general, what has been marketed and produced by the music industry, right? So popular musics.
And are there any approaches, at least, and I say this because there is this overshadowing factor of DALL-E and the visualization models of being able to generate almost anything because of the pre-training that they've received. But music has lagged to a certain degree on that front because of the many disciplines, different disciplines that exist within it. Are there any approaches of having, for example, pop music specific AIs or classical specific music AIs?
Yeah, of course, there are many approaches that really try to build specific models for specific musical styles. Yes, I mean, if you just think about all the publication and attempts that have been around that try to compose music in the style of, name it, Bach or Mozart, and well, of course, mostly composers of the, again, Western classical corpus.
And do you think that it is perhaps to a certain degree because of the structure of these musics as well? I know that you work with the tempos in music and the way you can meter it, and Indian music has a completely different structure to it. Persian music or Arabic musics have different structural differences with Western music. I wonder which, it's hard, of course, to be objective in these questions.
I think there's no simple explanation for it. I mean, one point is, of course, that this music is music that is very, or that is traditionally being notated in the form that most of the people developing these things can read and understand, and also because of that phrase into some kind of machine learning models, right? So since you brought up the example of Indian music, I mean, Indian music is, well, traditionally it's not being notated, right? So, and the Western classical canon is, well, that's the tradition that established the notation in the form that we have it. So, and I think this complex relation of the music to the notation formats kind of makes it more easy to approach it with an engineering mind, right? At least with probably with a Western culturally centered mind. So, yeah, I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I kind of think that it was to some degrees with these approaches, both in the 19th and 20th century, to kind of mathematicize both language and music to some degrees as well. So perhaps these different Western disciplines have had influences on...
How was the word mathematicize?
Yeah, I don't necessarily.
I mean that is also. I mean, if you speak with Indian percussionists, they love to do that, right? Indian percussionists love to do very complex ratios of rhythms, and they are very conscious about that. So it's very much about mathematics for Indian percussionists.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I always am fascinated by the Fibonacci sequences that come out of percussionists in Indian music. But I mostly mean in the sense that, especially, I think, from a positivistic approach of mathematics and philosophy, they try to have confined rules for almost anything, especially in the beginning of the 20th century. But of course, the Western canon in terms of music has been similar to the current status to some degree or another from the 17th century, I would say.
Yep. I mean, I think this whole logic that is to some extent behind that is, of course, is something that is very. It's very attractive to think of that in terms of data structures and since you called it also positivist approach, so that you would basically think that everything that you can symbolize in that way, that this is a complete representation of the music that you have in front of you, that this actually works. I mean, that's very much, maybe that's kind of what we can see in engineering approaches and their focus to the Western musics, maybe. Yeah.
But do you think there are any, or better to form it as, what are the best approaches to try to fix to some degree at least these biases and try to approach other types of canons?
Well, I mean, first of all, just look at data sets and wonder what is absent in these data sets is an interesting thing to discover. I mean, most engineers, I think they would tend not to really inspect their music data sets very much. But it is also, I think it's very much also to get in touch with the diversity of people who may want to interact with technologies and see what they would like to do, what the musics they interact with are and how they work and what kind of questions they have. So, I mean, that would also then guide engineering work to greater diversity, let's say, by not starting from a technical problem, but by rooting work maybe more in the demands of diverse communities, for example. That's not really happening, right?
I would say that here at KTH we have a very talented pool of people that are working with music and AI, such as yourself, that have a deeper understanding of music compared to perhaps most developers in AI. And just on that point, similar to what you said, how much do you think that artists and creators have to be involved in the creation of these models?
Well, at least I think it is good to phrase problems in collaboration with stakeholders. When you decide, for example, when you're interested in a certain style of music, first of all, you can try to diversify by looking at styles of music that have not been so much in the focus. And then maybe from the beginning on also include people from these practitioners from these musics into what you're doing. And I mean, as you say, at KTH, there are people who do that to some extent, but who also reflect on why didn't they do it from the very beginning. So I mean, I know these people very well, and we work together. So I think that's a lesson that we all learn throughout the years, coming from engineering, and then especially with the data-driven methods, a little bit seeing what kind of problems come with it. Also, responses from communities and so on when we just do things, right?
And to what degree do you take into consideration the fears that some of these creators have? We recently here at KTH hosted the Royal Arts Academy, and I tried to give them insight about the technology and how it works and the possibilities that it can provide for them. But I still sense that there is a great amount of fear from people that work with arts about the degrees to which AI can not necessarily replace them, but minimize their input in their tasks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's first of all, it's maybe, I mean, we shouldn't try to take away the fears, right? I mean, we should see that there maybe is also a good reason for these concerns, and but conversation about the needs and wishes from the beginning on can surely help to make the technology which is being developed more transparent to the people. And once a technology is a little bit more transparent in how, with which parameters it has been designed, with which goals it has been designed, from that moment on, if the people know, okay, this is that, and it has been designed with certain goals, then the fears will also maybe become, at least to some extent, less, because people understand more what that actually is and how it has been built.
Do you sometimes feel this quandary of to what degree you should explain, technically at least, how these models work?
Mm-hmm.
I can, from personal experience, say that when I try to explain just diffusion, say, to people that work with visual arts, after a while, with convolutional neural networks, they kind of stop understanding. But I feel that if they have a better understanding of especially a certain degree of the technical aspects, their grasp of the limitations also grow. But
yes.
I always wonder what creators of AI models, such as yourself, think about to what degree artists should be aware of the technical capabilities of these models.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think I would like to answer to that more like from the experience from a PhD course, which I did with a great colleague here at KTH with Bob Sturm. So which was about the basically artificial intelligence and creativity, a course about that, PhD course. And I mean, in that course we had a variety of people, many of them having no engineering background, musicologists, designers, musicians, and we had exactly that challenge, that we read also engineering papers and really tried collaboratively to understand, okay, what does it actually say? How does this work? Exactly as you say, explaining a diffusion model. I mean, we read related papers, more focused on the music stuff. But then, I mean, I have an engineering background, for example. But over the recent years, I've been working more with ethics of artificial intelligence, and now also with legal aspects. So I went away from developing models more towards to the considerations of the applications of these models. And I see in myself that when I read engineering papers, I mean, it is over a few years, many layers of knowledge have built on top of each other with deep learning. And it is really, really, it's very difficult to dig through all these layers and make the essence of a model understandable to some non-technical person. I mean, I have great difficulties reading nowadays deep learning papers because I haven't been in detail reading these for a few years now, right? So it's really a hard job to do that, but I think it's really important, and it is possible, right? I mean, you don't need to exactly understand how the convolutional layers or whatever kind of structures really work in great detail. But to some extent, what are the advantages and disadvantages and problems of some basic structures and how they are combined? Well, and then it's also that also really helps to demystify these very complicated papers. If you read that paper about whatever kind of machine learning model nowadays, if you like the first transformer papers or whatever, if you read through these, I mean, it makes references to so many other relatively recent deep learning things, and you have to just try to decipher that a little bit and tell it in a simple way, which is possible, but it is a very specific nut to crack, and it is I think it's for us it's a recurrent problem whenever we teach machine learning and artificial intelligence to people who are not really exactly in that field, but from even somewhere slightly else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to some ethicists that are of the strong position that AI has to be taught at high schools, basically. Because if you have just a fundamental understanding of some of the current models, let's say transformers, then you can apply that to whatever branch that those models are being used in. But it is indeed a very hard nut to crack, as you mentioned it. Now, regarding creativity and AI, I wonder, and it's a simple question, but it has many layers to it, but do you think that AI models can be creative?
Well, what is creative, right? So, I mean, creativity is essentially something that has been assigned. I mean, it's a human characteristic, right? Creativity. So, and there has been, well, throughout the literature, if you just try to look at it, I mean, what is creativity and how could we evaluate it in general without thinking about artificial intelligence? I mean, there has been also so many discussions about what should we look at? Should we look at like the outcome of something and say, is this creative? Or should we look at the process, how something is being done, if this is some kind of creative process? Or also, I mean, is the person who has done it a creative person or not? Or even like independent from these, also like the perspective from the outside. I mean, does this society regard something as creative or not? Right? So that whatever it is, it can be considered creative in the essence also. I mean, that's also a position. So in that way, yes, artificial intelligence could be creative if society decides that this or that is creative for some reason. Then yeah, why not? But I mean, we start from something that is very essential to, or that is very specific to human, and we put it into a computational context, right? So it's not the same probably then.
Yeah, and now this question perhaps will be even bigger, which is, can you create something, let's say art, without defining it?
Well, you would anyway. Then you would need to, given any kind of process or outcome of something that may be considered creative. I mean, would you then always look at it and say this is art or this is not art? I mean, that's not how it works, right? I mean, it's if you look at things like many decades ago, somebody put a toilet into a museum and claimed that well, this is art now, and this was not really well received back then, but it became a key to think about what is art, and probably in that process it became art, right? So, I mean, there is no way to clearly say something is art or not, right? That's,
that is the thing that I quite often tend to think about, is that we are basically trying in many ways with AI models to create something that we don't have a definition for.
Yeah.
And this goes more now to the perceptions of people, but Beethoven's 10th Symphony was completed a few years back by an AI model.
No.
Well,
not really.
It wasn't necessarily perhaps the most it wasn't one of these current models, definitely not. But a team attempted to do it with some machine learning systems. But from a societal perspective, do you think that people will one day be able to appreciate AI art in the same manner that they appreciate human-made art?
Yes, sure. I mean, for example, is the new recording that is out now by the Beatles, is that AI art now, or what is it?
Yeah, man, that is, I would say, cyborg maybe art, and it's half human, half artist. But I've tested it with a few people to, from time to time, show them pictures or even compositions, short compositions by AI. And so long as they don't know that it is an AI that has created it, they have a much greater appreciation for it.
Yeah, that's a well-known thing to happen, yeah.
Do you think that society throughout and this is just a general question, but from your own position, do you think that our perceptions towards art might be changing through the coming years? Well,
if I would have brought my time machine with me, I could put you in there and put you back to the onset of the disco movement, and I would ask you, what do you think? Will people at some point be on a wide basis in popular music accepting these kind of drum machines, right? Listen to today's pop music. I mean, it's these machines are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, right? So probably that there are always similar processes of new technologies being either at some point forgotten and ignored, or being integrated into cultural practice. So that's probably happening also with whatever we may call AI right now.
And on that subject, I would say that, do you think that there should be music or types of music that AI should avoid creating from an ethical perspective?
I wouldn't see such a very clear line to draw. I mean, it is why. I mean, for example, if you ask the question, should we really use a certain style of music if the people practicing that music really do not desire to have any kind of reshaping of their music through AI? Maybe that if you look at that community, maybe then it's not a ethically very sound thing to do. On the other hand, it may well also create new, interesting forms of art. If you, this is a weird situation, because I mean, if you look at what a community wants that is being done with, let's say, about music, with their music, I mean, if one would always ask everybody for their major opinion, then we would usually not have new inventions, new crazy things happening with music, because people would always have said, no, this is not music, so it's not ethical, we don't do it, right? But that didn't happen, so maybe also in such a rigorous way it shouldn't be happening now neither, right? Because it would restrict in a way also the transformations that a living culture always needs to go through in order to remain a living culture.
And on that subject, would you say that regarding the pre-training of these models, how much freedom should the AIs have regarding the corpuses in terms of, again, vision? In terms of vision, there is this debate regarding many artists who don't want their work to be available. Mm-hmm. And now there is systems that can poison basically corpuses and shade their works. Do you think that people should be able to restrict how much of their work is available to corpuses?
I would think so, yes, at least as long as we internationally, in some flavors, accept the idea of copyright, then we should also think about how it applies in these contexts, right? I mean, it shouldn't be just fine, I think, that a company takes copyrighted material and uses it to their own commercial advantage without being required to pay the people on whose work their profit is based on. So I mean that is a problem, I think. So, but how will you ever enforce that?
But wouldn't it to some degree conflict with the idea of freedom of information, in the sense that creating new things necessitates that these AI models have an understanding of all the music that has been before and create something?
Yeah, well, there's one thing which is the freedom of creation, and another thing to make financial profit without sharing it appropriately. I mean, these are two different things. They are related in this case. But, I mean, one thing is surely great and the other thing is surely problematic. But, yeah, how to go about it, I think that's the big discussion right now.
Would you have any possible solutions that you might be working on in terms of ethical understanding of these things?
You mean how to make sure that people whose music is being used for training, that they get some...
Yeah, I mean, in terms of regulations, because it has been for at least the past few months especially, have been really the subject of public debate.
Yeah.
Without any true good answers. There is either the option of restricting companies, which is very hard to enforce globally.
Yeah.
And then there is other options of restricting their access to data. But I wonder if there are any feasible options that you might think between these.
Well, universal basic salary. So. But,
yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll be soon on the way to that with AGIs and those are a bit further away, but hopefully not too far.
Hopefully, okay.
But if we move a bit away from the AI and move just shortly to the human, I know that you work with music of Crete. And I wonder, and dancing on it. So I wonder how we analyze perceptions of human beings towards and the reactions towards art and music specifically. I try to understand now where you want to. Well, let's say, how do we have a system of measurement, if we try to scientifically approach it, of understanding how people and humans react to music?
Measure how people react to music. Well, I mean, what you can measure is usually, I mean, this is a very dramatic reduction of what a reaction to music usually is, right? I mean, you can probably just, you can get some estimates of certain likings and preferences, yes.
Well, let's not necessarily put it in terms of even if you can, or let's put it as can you not. Is it one of those subjects that perhaps cannot necessarily be approached entirely in a scientific manner and needs to be...
Well, I mean, that's probably, referring to the Cretan music, that's probably also why I started to study musicology instead of engineering at some point in my life, because I did a long year study about how to analyze musics in that case, or the musics of Crete, in terms of what kind of structures are there, where's the beat, how do people understand which kind of dance it is from the sound, and all these things. And I reached a point where I saw, this is with a computational analysis we reach until a certain point, but if we really understand more about what is it that people appreciate in a music, what people see in a musical practice, then we go away from, as you say, from the strictly scientific method, and we go more towards observations, participant observations, taking part in a practice, interviewing people, long conversations about interpretations of music, and then we're getting somewhere. But that's very different from measuring something, right? From a scientific method that has an hypothesis and a clear support of or rejection of that hypothesis. That doesn't quite work then.
But and this goes a bit into neuroscience, but do you think that we should try to analyze the reactions of the brain basically to music?
Well, people have been doing that for a long time, and I think it's very interesting what is happening there. So either you do some measurement of the brain in certain as a response to a musical stimulus, or you also do behavioral experiments. You don't even need to measure the brain to understand at least something about perception. And these sciences have shown us over now some decades have given us really interesting insights into how it actually works that we perceive music and that we appreciate music, right? For example, like the entrainment of the body to music. Why is that so much fun to dance, right? For example, that is something where neuroscience, but the physiological measurements, but also behavioral measurements, behavioral experiments have given us a lot of insights into how that actually works, that we entrain, that we understand rhythm and all these kind of things. So it's super valuable.
And putting them all together, I would say, and AI to some degree, do you think that there is a possibility of having a deeper understanding of human behavior through those paths?
Well, I think so. I think that I know that there are interesting attempts to connect neuroscience and research in machine learning. I'm not an expert. I haven't read in depth what are the recent outcomes out of that. But it's always interesting if you bring different strands of research in touch with each other and see what happens. And music psychology, neurosciences of music, and machine learning on music have both in parallel really brought forward very interesting insights. So it's definitely always an interesting thing to connect these strands of sciences to see how can they bring new knowledge to each other, but also maybe create something that is in an astonishing way very new. But I think I think that's great. But I would lie if I would say no that I know a lot about it.
Yeah, I hope that, and I have read a few papers on this, and I think that many interesting things are soon to be coming forward about.
Yeah, I also
both our perception of art and perhaps the human brain.
I only hope that there's always the tendency right now to in a certain way to hype everything that tries to in a way anthropomorphize the machine learning stuff right now. And this has just like as we now the Beatles thing became very popular now also as, okay, this has been done with artificial intelligence. Come on, not really. I mean, at least, well, I mean, it's a bit of machine learning in there. It's interesting. It's fantastic. But so in the same way, also these connections between, for example, if you take neuroscience and machine learning together now, there's really interesting things that can come out of it. But it could also be used very nicely for just to create a big hype around finding out something that is essentially trivial, but will get some people to a lot of citations, right?
I think the tendency of the human being for anthropomorphism is perhaps one of going to be the breakthroughs of AI in creating music and being actually that is loved by people.
Yeah.
Because it has this sense of, you mentioned demystifying it, but at the current moment for the general public, I feel that there is this sense of mystical AI that kind of even surpasses human beings in many tasks of being some sort of a super intelligence or something that might be a path for it to create music and be perceived and loved by many people, in the same sense that the Beatles songs, maybe they just generate Beatles songs of their own without any John Lennon singing. But that would be definitely interesting to see. But if we maintain the subject of music, I would say of places of minorities or places where music of a certain culture is to some degree vanishing. And we have Bob Sturm that we just mentioned working on to some degree preserving music of certain cultures through AI. What are your thoughts on that?
It could be interesting, yeah. I mean, taking for example now Bob's work, that's of course like, I mean, Bob is also working on a super interesting tradition in Irish music, but that's maybe also a tradition that really is not in the need of any technology coming there and preserving it, right? I mean, it's alive and kicking, right? Yeah, on the other hand, I mean, what does it mean to preserve a tradition? So, sure, documenting a tradition, for example, as we were able to do it until now, using notation, video material, acoustic recordings, texts, that can be that could be enriched using artificial intelligence in very interesting ways, by having possibilities not only to have static documentations of something, but even like generative models in certain styles. In a way that can be very interesting, absolutely. I mean, technology is just not the magic thing now to keep traditions alive. I mean, human beings keep traditions alive, not artificial intelligences. So
maybe create them to keep the memories alive, perhaps.
Well, it's an interesting thought also to think. I mean, you can of course create artificial traditions using artificial intelligences. I mean, you can. I mean, that's actually a very nice idea to just. I mean, this has been done before without artificial intelligence, but just inventing a music tradition. I mean, or inventing traditions in general, but that could be done with artificial intelligence. That's very creative, right?
Well, we'll just have to see whether AI can preserve these musics in a few thousand years or not. Again, we come back to your machine, time machine, to be able to see the results. But if I may ask, regards to the ethics, where do you think, and your work on that, are the central focuses should be with the current models that we have?
Well, I think that we now in our work we argue that the focus should in general be to whatever kind of model and you are using or developing, whatever kind of goal you have, it is always good at some stage in development or in regular distances, also in regular intervals, to to brainstorm and to analyze who are the people that this is actually affecting in some way, positive or negative, right? And then to wonder, okay, how can I interact with these people? How can I take their needs and interests into consideration? So that's I think a lot what our work on ethics right now is about. So to take it away from, well, let's say ethics as a set of rules that you have somewhere on your code of conduct and that you look through and you think, yeah, roughly okay, I can do it. And going more towards a more positive approach where you do something and you do not think about it as a set of points, but rather questions that are related to people, to identify people who interact with your project, in order also to give it a more positive perspective, a perspective of care about people. So it's not just to avoid risks, it's not to avoid harm only, but it is also to really get a positive perspective into the project. For example, that you say, okay, I mean, we do this project, but we take into account certain stakeholders who might be interested in it and direct it towards them. So in that way, you actually we argue that with an ethics of artificial intelligence, if you do something like that, you don't necessarily have this negative restricting perspectives of ethics on artificial intelligence, but rather a perspective that opens ways that you haven't thought about before for your development, and that at the same time might be less problematic and harmful.
It is, again, going back perhaps to the responsibility of the developers, to the core of which is the core of the question.
Yeah.
And
well, they are responsible. So.
Oh yes, but to what degree they keep themselves as good actors and responsible actors is the main question. But as a final question, and this is a hypothetical question that I always tend to ask, but what are your thoughts regarding AGI and the challenges regarding it and the possibilities and the that it can have, and also implementing creativity into general models?
Well, AGI, so it's a little bit like, I mean, looking at the situation of the world right now, I would be concerned if AGI came into existence, because even the technology that we have right now is so brutally misused in hands of power. So I'm very concerned, and I think I have said that also before in some other conversations, that I think, I mean, the problem, thinking about AGI is not so relevant. I think we will, if we continue like that with also the environmental impact that also machine learning and artificial intelligence increasingly has. I mean, if we continue destroying our planet so successfully, we won't reach artificial general intelligence anyway. We will have ruined our basis for existence before that.
So you're not of the camp of AI developers that believe that climate change will be solved by AI then?
No.
No. It's a shrinking camp, I can say, so far, but there were many hopefuls, at least in the past few years, that will be our salvation in all questions.
Yeah, it's this kind of perspective that you think that a complex problem can now suddenly be solved because you have a very complex data analysis machine, and that this will help. I mean, this in some problems that are really very, very well described by the data, that might be the case, but for very complex problems, I don't know.
So on the note of hoping for more responsible and responsible development of AI and developers of AI. I want to thank you very much for participating in this podcast, André Holzapfel.
Thank you very much for inviting me. That was a pleasure. Thank you.